when you hear Richard Dawkins, I think Terry Eagleton said that listening to Dawkins on theology is like listening to somebody write a book about biology whose only knowledge of the subject is having once read the Great British Book of Birds. And okay, fair enough.
But that actually turns out to be a real problem. And it's a problem with regards even to the meme idea, because you don't have to extend Dawkins' work very far to understand that religious stories are memes.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and there's a hierarchy of memes, and some of them are very functional.
But then here's the thing, like that frustration that you're sort of throwing in that direction, I think people throw towards you when you say, well, religion, you don't have to look very far to see that religion is a meme. Well, without further clarification, and of course there's going to be it, you can understand why to somebody first listening, that sounds almost atheistic. Well, religion is a meme. No,
right?
Religion is not a true historical account of, the history of the universe.
It's not a true historical account.
It's a meme.
Wait, it's not a true historical account?
See, this is what I'm saying. It's tricky. Like his language is very tricky. I forgot what he says here.
So a buddy of mine sent me this timestamp who's was a Christian, deconverted, and is like Jesus curious again, and said like, all right, I'm gonna give Jordan Peterson another shot, and then sent me this timestamp and was like, I really appreciated this because I think this is the type of quote unquote humility he wants from Christians. He said, the impossibility of reducing the biblical corpus to a reassuring banality.
Now, when you say that the resurrection of Jesus.
Well, what does it mean historically that the Spirit of God brooded upon the primordial waters? Like, what does that mean historically? Well, no one knows.
I agree.
What that means historically.
I don't think that at least most of Genesis or parts of Genesis.
So he's not saying it's not true. He's saying it's not just true. That's what I gathered. Like, he's not saying that it's false, but he's saying that it's not just a true telling of a story.
Yeah, they're kind of getting into which is true, that there's different genres in the Bible.
Yes.
And sometimes there is metaphor used, and it actually, it's not, in some cases, it's not even describing something historic at all. It's just, a way of communicating an idea.
Yeah.
And they kind of go through the Bible and they talk about a few different examples. Like I think they're about to get into Cain and Abel here, and they kind of parse that out. But in some ways, the whole thing, again, sort of feels like a tangent, just in the sense that although there are different genres within the Bible, and although some of the language is metaphorical, whatever is meant by God brooding over the waters, I'll admit that is, I mean, if you look at that's the entire Genesis account is, regardless of what time horizon it took place across, it is definitely, in terms of how it was written, a polemic against other ancient Near Eastern cosmologies. That's for sure. If you look at the other stories, it is clearly the writer saying Yahweh is the genuine article, and he is actually over your water God in this way, and he's over, and it's very clearly directed to that original Near Eastern audience as a type of like, pay attention to this. This is legit.
Yeah, I mean, even Abraham going to sacrifice Isaac, and then the angel showing up and stopping him has so many. There's a motif foreshadowing of obviously God his only begotten Son Jesus dying on the cross, but there's also Yahweh doesn't require child sacrifice motif in that. Like, there's also the Yahweh doesn't do this. Look, it's similar to your child sacrifice and all the weird stuff you guys were doing. However, he does not allow Abraham, and he sends an angel to do it. But Abraham was willing to sacrifice. And then it goes on to call Abraham a friend of God in Hebrews, right? So, yeah, absolutely, that it is, to your point, kind of dunking on the false gods of that time and space.
Hey, thank you so much for checking out the video. Comment down below and let me know what you think. And be sure to check out this video that YouTube is recommending just for you. Let me know if they nailed it. All right? I'll see you over there. Peace.
Yep. The other thing I would say is I think that there is an error that can be made in thinking of the Old Testament in particular too much as just a metaphor or too much as symbol, because it raises the question, then at what point does it actually become
literal?
Like where do you draw the line of history began? And then you also have that interesting part. I think it's in Matthew, gosh, I might mess this up, 19, I'm not sure, but where Jesus kind of describes things in a more literalistic sense. Then you also have the chronologies that kind of go back. God has the son of so-and-so, son of so-and-so, and then it goes back to Adam. So that's also...
Well, I think all the characters are literal.
Yeah.
I think all the characters are literal. I think the meaning of the stories can be multiple things. I think they can be literal characters with incredible motifs foreshadowing Jesus and Abraham to Joseph to Moses, and we see these motifs pointing to Jesus ultimately, and all the interesting parallels. I mean, me and my son are going through the story of Joseph being sold, and and then suffering, only to come back around and redeem his brothers from starvation. And like the parallels to Christ and Joseph are wild. And there's that with Abraham and Isaac and Moses and all these things. So I think it could be and both. Like I think it could be literal people throughout history with these really interesting stories that all foreshadow Jesus and also have really wild implications for these stories we identify with as humans and see ourselves in.
Yeah, and to go to the resurrection, which is kind of where this all started, I think that that's the ultimate example of it being both.
Yeah.
It is both the ultimate transcendent symbol, and it literally historically took place.
Amen. Okay, let's let them finish this part.
Are supposed to be, I mean, the Bible is a library, right? It's not a book. And that means that it's going to contain different genres.
That's for sure.
And so when
and some of them are more historically accurate, and some of them tilt more towards that kind of elusive, I don't mean elusive in the, I mean ALLUSIV.
Yeah, sure.
Right? That elusive and symbolic form that characterizes Genesis 1.
So because there are different genres here, it depends on what story we're talking about. And I think that what I often observe you doing is we might talk about Christianity, and if you aren't comfortable committing to a historical ideal, you'll start talking about the Spirit moving over the face of the waters, which is obviously a much more mythological ideal, and not quite equivocating them, but moving between them too quickly and not delineating them enough. So if I asked you, do you think that the Spirit moved across the face of the waters, and you said to me something like, I think it's still happening.
Right, that is what I would say.
Hey, fair enough. Yeah, that makes sense.
It always happens. It happened at the beginning of time, and it's always happening.
When somebody says, did the Exodus story happen? Did the Jews enslaved in Egypt break free of their slavery and move to the Promised Land across the desert for 40 years? Did that happen? You have also said, of the Exodus specifically, it's still happening.
Yes.
Now, to me, that's far more inappropriate than saying that the Spirit is still moving across the face of the waters, because I think what people mean there is, do you believe that these people in that time period actually did this in such a way that, for instance, might show up in an archaeological report?
Well, I think that's the simplest answer to that is probably.
Sure, and that's fine too. But
we don't know. To the degree that there's been archaeological investigations into the kinds of biblical narratives that you've described, the archaeological evidence tends to fall on the side of historical accuracy in relationship to the Bible, quite surprisingly often.
Clearly, you're
Wow, that's bold.
That was
because so you tell me what you think about this. This is how I feel. I feel like a lot of the skeptical perspective, and I don't want to hypergeneralize, but a lot of it is like circular reasoning. Jesus couldn't have rose from the dead because rising from the dead is a supernatural event. And our materialist presupposition is that supernatural events don't happen. Therefore, Jesus didn't rise from the dead. The Gospels cannot be early in their writing, because if they were early in their writing, that means that Jesus accurately predicted that the temple would be destroyed in the year 70 AD. And there's no way that Jesus could have accurately predicted the temple could have been destroyed. Therefore, the Gospels are written after 70 AD. It's like, well, if you start with your end in mind, then you could argue anything. So it almost sounds like Alex saying, I find this more problematic, that Jordan Peterson is saying, well, according to whatever evidence we have of archaeology, the exodus of the Jews from Egypt probably happened. Reasonable conclusion, the Bible is probably right. And he goes, well, no, that's more provocative and that's more dangerous. And it's like, well, why? Because it can't be true because it's in the Bible, because you've already started with the presupposition that the Bible is not authoritative. Therefore, like it's just a big circle that he's using.
Yep.
I mean, help me understand. Am I wrong here?
No, you're right. This goes back to David Hume's argument against miracles.
This is this secular reasoning against belief that you had something like this pulled up, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I just think that this is kind of what you see with the historic case for the resurrection to begin with is people, even in the scholarship, will go, well, we know that it didn't really happen. So then how else do we explain the empty tomb, the conversion of these people who were scattered sheep who are now emboldened and willing to die for it? How else do we explain all these different pieces of what happened in history? The conversion of Paul, the conversion of James. Well, definitely not the miraculous, because that doesn't exist.
Right.
So it's like, it's this weird thing where if you have a fixed a priori belief against something, then the encounter with that very thing won't convince you that it's real because you know that it's, and this is the same thing that you see, you know, Richard Dawkins and and some of these other guys have been asked, Peter Atkins, I think it was, were asked this question: what could, would, might, should convince you that God is real?
And they said nothing.
And they said, I mean, if he, there's a couple versions of this, but basically if he came with a booming voice and said, it is me, I would think I was hallucinating. I would think there's no way that this is really him. And to me, it kind of exposes how severely strong the bias against the supernatural is within that belief system of materialism.
That's sad, man.
Hey, thank you so much for checking out the video. Comment down below and let me know what you think. And be sure to check out this video that YouTube is recommending just for you. Let me know if they nailed it. All right? I'll see you over there. Peace.